a billionaire tax, which was proposed, which would be a penalty or a tax on assets that are liquid, but that have not yet been sold. And it would look back 3 years, essentially going after Bezos or Elon, Larry, Sergey, basically going after the top 10 billionaires in the world. And then maybe it was going to be the top 700. Then it became a millionaire tax. All of this to try to pay for these bills. While so much money has been poured into the system, NFTs and stocks are going through the roof. Where do we want to begin, gentlemen? Does anybody have thoughts on this brief billionaire tax that was floated and what that says about where we are as a country in terms of how we think about the success of our greatest entrepreneurs? Do we want to talk about what's fair or the process?
Well, I thought the process was insane. And what was crazy was that, Ron Wyden had been working on this proposal theoretically for the past 2 years. And at no point did he bother to float the trial balloon with his colleagues in the Senate to even see whether these people actually supported it, beyond some folks on the progressive left who are ideologically fixated on, this confiscatory way of running the country. The funniest thing about that bill to me, and I let the powers that be know this, is, hey guys, I've always been on the record. I'm happy to pay whatever tax you want. I feel super blessed to be in America. I'm going to pay 30%, 80%. I don't care. But I had a real issue with the way that bill was written because I'm like, the Democrats are writing a bill that will disproportionately tax Democratic successful billionaires. And it'll leave intact the Kochs, who is literally the boogeyman to the progressive left who wants to write this bill. And I thought, how could you even write this bill this way? It is so stupid.
You're saying because those people own private assets and this goes after public.
Guys like me would have been paying billions of dollars and the Kochs would not have paid zero.
Because their entities are private and yours are public.
Yes.
Just so the audience understands.
Yes. How insane is that? And yet we're the ones supporting
that is a great second order observation. So these people clearly didn't think through.
That was my only issue with the thing. It's like, if you want to try to ram and jam this thing through, go ahead and try. I'm not going to be the one that files a lawsuit the day after it's passed and takes it to the Supreme Court, which will get heard. And, this conservative Supreme Court would not have allowed this tax to stand. You can't target 700 people. But by the way, the reason you can't target 700 because there's a slippery slope from 700 to 7 million to 70 million. And what it does is it allows tax and spend politicians a blank ledger to go absolutely crazy and just fund every single harebrained pork barrel scheme that they can come up with. And that's really what we stopped, was an important slippery slope. And then in its place, I think, is a tax that is fair. A simple surtax on adjusted gross income. If you're above X, you pay 5 million. And if you're above Y, you pay another 3. So 8%.
5% or 3%.
On every kind of income. And I think that's a really reasonable way to get folks to pay more. That seems like a good start. But the first version of the bill was so stupid. And the thing that really angered me, though, was it targeted Democratic successful people and left alone Republican successful people, written by the Democrats.
Freeberg, what are your thoughts on the confiscatory nature of this? I've never heard the word used that way, confiscatory, where we're going back and saying, listen, you won so much, we're just going to take 20 or 30% of it.
We all pay property taxes. So there is a experience we've all had with paying a percentage of assets that we own, people of all income brackets every year, to your local government to fund local services that everyone participates in. I don't think it's unfounded. Now, if you look at history as a guide, France introduced a wealth tax to people making over, I think it was 1.3 million euro per year. And it was shut down and came back basically 1999, 2000. And between the year 2000 and the year 2016, 25% of millionaire households emigrated out of France during this period. And the amount of tax revenue that was lost during that period of time was greater than the new revenue generated from the wealth tax that was introduced. And so France ultimately scrapped the wealth tax. And there have been a number of other, reasonably good examples of European countries putting in place these wealth taxes and then kind of removing them later. So, on the one hand, I think that we've all seen this experience, and Switzerland does this. I think you get taxed on your total assets in Switzerland, and you have to go negotiate every year with respect to how much you pay. It's a very weird process. So on the one hand, there is this kind of experience and precedent for paying some percentage of assets. Sometimes it's a targeted asset and sometimes it's not. But the longer range consequences as we've seen is like, emigration, and people realize there's always a better choice. The question we have in the United States is, if we introduce a wealth tax like this, where will successful Americans emigrate to? You can see how people could leave France and go to Belgium or go to the UK or go to Switzerland or go somewhere else where they might be better off. Where are Americans going to move to?
Canada.
You're successful. Canada? I mean, are you going to move to Vancouver? I mean, you're from Canada, but Zach, would you move? Where would you move to? It's almost like there ends up being this kind of really interesting experiment that'll be run here. Now, remember, this wealth tax was introduced by Warren and others last year. So this wasn't some new concept that was fly by night. This has been one of those things that's been on the shelf for a while. What happened is they pulled it down from the shelf and said, let's try this now.
They've never had committee hearings on it. They've never had committee markups on it. It's been tried and repealed in European countries. And like you said, they pull it down at the 11th hour. Why? Because their carefully laid plans, which they've been concocting for 3 months, were thrown overboard when Sinema said she wouldn't support the rate increases. Now, I don't know why they wouldn't go to her at the beginning of the process instead of waiting till the end of the process. But so because of that, they're scrambling around trying to find any source of revenue. So it's, will a billionaire tax work? No. Well, what about a corporate AMT? How about that? No. What about a millionaire surcharge? These guys are like burglars rummaging through the house. They hear the sirens. They hear the sirens coming, and they're like, "What can we take? Oh, the TVs are bolted down. Can't get that. Where's the jewelry? What can we take?" And it's just, you can't set tax policy this way. And this whole idea that we can set tax policy based on our intuitions of fairness without having hearings to ask the question, what will this do to the economy? How much damage will it cause? This is absurd.
Let's be honest. Bernie Sanders and Elizabeth Warren did not win the nomination. The country specifically wanted a moderate. Biden was sold as a moderate. Go back to the way it was. Moderate Dems, like Clinton, like Obama. This is the classic Coca-Cola. This isn't new Pepsi nonsense. And we got hoodwinked, basically. And I think what a lot of Democrats are seeing now, especially the moderate ones, is, hey, wait a second, Biden is Warren and Bernie in sheep's clothing, perhaps. And we didn't want this. We didn't want Trump. He was too hot. And we don't want this too left, crazy, let's just take everybody's money, randomly change the tax code. I don't think American citizens want to live in a world where we change tax code at the 11th hour. That is scary to people, all people who have savings.
If you care about the economy.
Well, yes, but these
progressives, I think these progressives, so it used to be that taxation was a necessary evil. You tax people because you got to pay for government and government programs. Everybody hates it, but you do it and you try to figure out the way of achieving the revenue government needs in the least destructive way possible. But I think progressives now, they are so focused and monomaniacal about this issue of income inequality, the fact that there's some people who've gotten richer than everybody else, that I think they're willing to tax those people. I mean, they would like to siphon off money from those people. I think they would siphon it off just to light it on fire, just to level people. And so they don't really care what the impact is going to be on the economy.
Well, I mean, and their position was, in fact, ban the billionaires. That was their roof. But, before we get to that, I just want to say, these rules, I think Americans want the rules to be simple. And I don't think people want you changing the rules at the last minute and then making them retroactive. I think all Americans want taxes to be predictable and simple, not just change them willy-nilly because you change the budget. This seems so unthoughtful and crazy. Chamath, your point.
I have 2 points to make. The first is that I don't think anybody really knows what's in these bills. And as a result of nobody really knowing what's in these bills, they're used as negotiating chits. When Biden came out and said, we have a $1.85 trillion bill now, and we're ready to get this done so that he could, fly to Europe and, fly to COP26 and kind of, declare victory. Unfortunately, the progressive wing of the Democratic Party in the House said, no, I'm not ready to dance yet. And, they have consistently refused to sign an infrastructure bill until they got what they needed from this other bill. And so when Pelosi called the vote, she had to pull it because they weren't going to get the votes necessary to get this bill passed. So what this says to me is that even with spending. It doesn't matter whether you're spending because I think it's $1 trillion bill, right? That's a $1 trillion bill. This is a $1.875 trillion bill. Nobody cares about the quantity and nobody cares about the details. They care about some perceived moral victory. This is the only reason why we're seeing this, Mexican standoff that we're seeing today. If these things were so substantively important, we would have passed the first bill. We would have negotiated a reasonable second version and passed that too. Instead, we're here going through the end of the year with nothing done. And I just want, the Democratic leadership who listens to this, because we know a lot of people in Washington listen to this podcast. You guys got to get something done, because if you go into the midterms with nothing done, with a Democratic president, Democratic Senate, and Democratic House, this is going to be a bloodbath.
Well, this is why something will get done. But, I think the political realities are that at the end of the day, the Democrats will come together and pass something. But it's concerning that we're just talking about doing something because it will help you in the midterms. In the immortal words of Nancy Pelosi, you have to vote for the bill in order to find out what's in it. I mean, at the end of the day, we're not even going to know what's in this thing. We're spending it'll probably end up being a $1.75 trillion bill. It'll be stacked on top of the spending that's already happened. Remember, Biden already passed $1.9 trillion of COVID relief, another $1.2 trillion of infrastructure.
No, that hasn't passed yet.
Well, it's going to, along with this now $1.75 trillion of this new social spending bill, assuming
right. So it's about $5 trillion
right.
of wealth redistribution.
And progressives will have set the stage for this to be perceived as some sort of failure. It's
by the way, David, if you go back, then if you take that $5 trillion and add it to all the COVID before and all of the Fed buying, we've probably had one entire turn of GDP. So call it $20 to $22 trillion of money created in the last 3 or 4 years.
Right.
Now you go back. So now you go back to Jason, what you started. The thing that I have struggled with the most in these last few weeks is trying to come to a conclusion on inflation. My worry is that it's here and it will be persistent. And inflation comes in two ways. Way number one is if you massively increase the supply of money. Why? Let's just say the economy had $100 and now all of a sudden you just print another 100. So now there's $200. What will happen is all of the goods and services that make up that 100 will get repriced to absorb the 200. So prices go up, inflation goes up. The second way that inflation can happen is if middle and lower income people buy and spend. Because when rich people have extra money, they just buy financial assets. That's why you get financial bubbles. But practical goods and services are bought by average, everyday, normal working folks. And their wages are going up. And so I think what we've created is a really distortive inflationary cycle that's going to really hurt the United States because, as Sachs talked about, we cannot print enough money to pay for the debt when interest rates go up.